In this video, I'll be showing you how to replace a washer water inlet valve for a front load GE washing machine. Our washing machine is 5 years old and out of warranty, and it started giving us all kinds of problems in the last year. Primarily, it was making a really loud screeching noise every time cold water was being filled into the machine. I did do some troubleshooting, just trying to isolate the problem if it was something with the water lines and back. I switched the hot for the cold, and I determined that it was the cold water inlet valve that was the problem. I did watch another video on YouTube to see how easy this might be, and although they didn't have the loud screeching noise that we did, they did have a similar H2O error message on the display. So I thought I would share my experience. So as you can see here, the machine runs just fine, so we just have to figure out what's going on with the water. I set a timer just so I could show everybody watching this that this really wasn't that hard to do and how long it actually took. Probably the hardest part just of this whole thing was just getting back here behind the machine, just where the wall is and where the hoses are. But once I got all the hoses off, then I had to take the front part off. The soap dispenser, pretty simple. You have to push this button down, pull that out to get to these screws. There's going to be 5. The 2 middle ones are the longest one. That keeps everything connected. But once you got them all out, make sure you keep them sorted because they have to go back in the same holes. The middle ones are the most important. So now that I'm working on getting the screws off, the first thing you have to do is take off the front panel, which is going to be your display, your knob, all of that. When you're taking it off, you have to be really careful because of the way it slides on. Something I wish I would have known once I started doing this, because I could have easily broken it. I didn't, but you'll see here in a second that there's actually a couple screws that this panel will slide over to make it connect. So what I would advise you to do is don't lift it up like I am, but kind of slide it off to the right, and then you'll see how it hooks up. So right here you can see where that screw lines up with that notch, so that's what's holding me back. So just be careful when you're taking it off so you don't break that part, because that will be expensive. But there's going to be 3 screws on the top. That's how you're going to remove that top panel. So I'll take those off and then just snap the lid right off the top, and you got access to all of your internal parts. I thought it was kind of funny because once I got the lid off, there was actually some paperwork inside the unit that says how to take the whole thing apart should you need to get in here to replace any parts. But this little thing right here is the part that I'm going to be replacing. There are 5 little electrical clips that snap onto what powers the pump that gets the water into the tank. Again, because of the wall, it was a little tricky to get in there to take all those off, so I sped it up a little bit just so you have to see me screwing around and get this whole thing off. Now that I've got all of the electrical parts off, now I just have to detach it from the back of the machine. So there's 4 screws, so I'm going to take that off. And again, it was hard just because of the positioning against the wall. But now that it's free, I can do what I got to do. So now the fun begins. I got the unit off of the machine, so now the hard part is getting the hose clamps off of that part to replace it. My personal opinion on this is that GE makes these parts really cheap, so they can either sell you a new part through a technician for $400, $500 plus labor, or they sell you a warranty plan. They're going to make money off you one way or another. As you can see, I finally did have to bite the bullet and push the washing machine away from the wall just to work on it, because it was really hard to get in there. So the hoses, you'll see here, I'm using a screwdriver and pliers. And this is the first time this has ever been serviced. The clamps are really tight, so I did use a screwdriver to push the hoses off of that part. But you do want to be careful, because if you do it wrong, you could damage those hoses, and then you're going to have to do a whole bunch of other work that you really don't want to do. One other piece of advice I'd give you is be careful if you're doing this where you're setting your tools down. You kind of forget where you are. It's uncomfortable, whatnot. But as you can see here, I lost my screwdriver, and yeah. Okay, so after about a 20-minute break of getting the back panel off to get my screwdriver back, I finally got the part off. All of the hoses are free. That's my old part. This is a new one that's going to go on there. So the part itself I got from this company. I could have ordered it directly from GE, but I didn't want to wait for shipping. This company had it on the shelf in stock that day, so I went and picked it up. I paid just over $100, so in my opinion, it was worth it to just deal with it going through them. But now that I got the part on, I got to put the hoses back on. I did find out that I could have easily wasted a bunch of time if I didn't think about the wiring and the hoses, because if the wiring is in the wrong spot, you'll put all the hoses back on and then you realize that you did it wrong. You have to take all the hoses back off. And so just take that in consideration. Think about what you're doing before you start doing it. But I found that the hoses actually went back on pretty smoothly. I did speed it up here just a little bit so you can kind of see the whole process. But once all the hoses are on, you want to put the clamps back on, get them nice and snug, and then just get ready to screw it back to the back of the washing machine itself. So once the piece is screwed back onto the washing machine, now I gotta just hook the electrical back up. These were a little tricky again, just because of the snugness of the clips, but you'll see how they line up. Just make sure you get them on there. Once they're in, and you just gotta put it back together. Okay, so I got all the power clipped back in. Now I just have to put the top back on. There were 3 screws that I have to put back in. Once those are in, then I'm gonna just put the panel back on the front. And just a general reminder, you've got that little notch out for that bolt that's going to secure it. I did find out that the soap dispenser tank needs to line up a very particular way with these holes here, so just be mindful of that because it'll be, tricky once you put the front back on, it doesn't line up. So once I got the top screwed back on, all I have to do is put the panel back on the front. It's not that hard. I'm just going to clip it back in. And I'm going to pay attention to that right side that we talked about earlier to make sure it lines up. It's that notch out with that bolt that's on the face of the washing machine. But once I had that lined up, you'll see that it just kind of clips back in there. And then there's going to be a couple screws on the left-hand side that will hold the face together. Okay, so now that the panel's back on, now all I have to do is put the screws back in. One thing you want to note is the blue plastic piece where we took the screws out earlier, the holes do have to line up. And I did notice that when I was putting the right side in, it was sagging a little bit, so you might want to use your left hand to kind of prop it up to get those holes to line up. But once they're all in, you're smooth sailing. You just put the soap dispenser back in, connect all the hoses, and I will give it a run. Revisiting my stopwatch, you see I'm just under 2 hours. I remember I did lose about 20-25 minutes when I had to rescue my screwdriver. So all in all, the whole project took me about 90 minutes start to finish. But at the end of the day, I'm really happy with how this turned out. You'll see right here, I'm going to run the machine. And if you go back to the front of the video, you'll see right about the time when the water starts to dispense, you'll hear that loud noise. This time when it dispenses, it's very quiet and it runs very smoothly.